Hello, everyone. This panel is obviously quite close to MedTech World's heart, because since our inception, all we've been trying to do is literally going global, trying to find different ecosystems across different continents, across wherever there is anyone who's in one way or another involved in MedTech or healthcare. And we've been trying to leverage those connections to bring everyone together, be it if they're across the Atlantic, across the Pacific, or wherever. And obviously, through this panel, we've tried to keep quite an international flair to it, to have some advice on how to, especially if you've been over a good number of years working in one particular continent and now are looking to expand beyond that continent or possibly seek investment from other investors globally, you'd need to have some advice from people that have done it or are working right in the midst of it. And joining me here, there's David coming from the startup background perspective, Ruchi from an investor perspective, and Prakash, who has quite an extensive CV working across the board and wearing multiple hats. Maybe quickly we can give a very brief intro about ourselves, and then we'll dive right in.
I'm David Constantine, co-founder and CEO of Juniper Biomedical. We are developing dramatically improved treatments for pelvic health conditions, including urinary incontinence, fecal incontinence, chronic pelvic pain, sexual dysfunction in both women and men, using a unique neuromodulation micro-implant. So an implant that's about half the size of a US dime. It's put in with a minimally invasive procedure and allows us to treat in a very different, much more precise way than alternatives in peripheral neuromodulation.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ruchi. I'm a medical doctor and a Stanford MBA, and I also took the Stanford Biodesign course, which was mentioned in the last panel. I represent MFE Partners. I'm a partner there. We invest from seed to Series A in highly deep tech companies. I take care of the healthcare deep tech companies there. To give you a brief background about myself, I was born and raised in the Middle East. I was born in Libya in north of Africa. And then our family moved to Dubai in the early 90s. So I did part of my schooling from Libya, part of it to Dubai. Then I went to medical college in India, and then I came to Stanford for my MBA. For the past 4 years, I've been involved in investing for MFE. And prior to that, I was running my own robotic surgery startup. And we filed a couple of patents, and I think it was really exciting to see that entire biodesign thing come to fruition with the startup and now in the investing world as well. Thank you.
Hi, hello. Thank you for having me here. I'm Prakash Thakur. I lead the healthcare and life science between US and UK, cross-border innovation, trade, and investments. So a lot of my work involved engaging with C-suite of venture-backed company to large publicly traded companies based here primarily in the west coast of the US in their pursuit to expand, whether it is R&D collaboration, market access, regulatory policy, or set up businesses in the US or draw UK and investment, and vice versa, UK companies coming out and exporting their technology into the US market. And a lot of our work involved in the medtech, digital health, precision medicine, advanced therapies, and other areas. Before to that, I've been in the venture capital world, built companies myself, succeeded, failed, did a bunch of venture capital advisory for 30-plus growth stage companies. My background has been in medical technology, academia, industry, consulting, before I started building startup and ventures. Thank you.
Thank you. So, David, I'm going to start off with you. You've just closed successfully a funding round. I'm pretty sure you've obviously reached out to investors from across the globe or anyone you can get your hands on. How do you think that differs when it comes to reaching out to investors who are based within North America, specifically US, as opposed to others who are based either in Europe or Middle East or Asia? How did you try? Were you trying to do different approaches? Did your approaches differ from when you started, possibly sharing the same pitch, the same deck, then eventually trying to tackle different geographies differently? What's your take on this?
This wasn't my first time pursuing global investment, nor was it the first time we closed global investment. I would say I struck out a lot more, of course, than the money that we pulled in. But I think the number one thing that we took away from taking on a component of our fundraising strategy to include global investment was simply just gaining comfort. Foundational comfort that your investors do not need to come from your backyard. And for some companies, it's a really glaring strategic choice to pursue a global investment strategy because they want to commercialize in a particular location. That wasn't why for us, why we considered it. For us, it was much more about broadening the aperture. As the MedTech VC ecosystem has contracted over the years and changed in their risk appetite, it's warranted to pursue a larger aperture in that appropriate fit risk profile.
And do you find that different investors from across the globe look at investments and from a different risk angle? Like, have you came across maybe one particular geography in which they're much more risk averse as opposed to others?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably quite nuanced, just like you'd expect, region by region. I'm sure that there are players who are very risk averse and those who have a much greater risk appetite and seek those earlier opportunities. But I'm sure that there are some regional trends. I didn't look at it from that perspective. I was mostly opportunistic in connecting with folks. My personal strategy has been much more through warm, direct introduction than to simply just cold call and pursue. So on that basis, there was less constructed by a region. But I do, at this point, appreciate that there are certain characteristics that may go along with an APAC, particularly in Japan or particularly in China, or in Europe or in Northern Africa, Middle East. There's going to have some flavor to that. And I don't think I'm an expert in that specifically. I think that the key is talk to a lot of people. There are a lot of companies who have raised capital from, in this room, because I could see you, who have raised capital from outside U.S. investors that can offer their perspective and their experience of what worked well for them and what didn't work. I certainly learned about what didn't work.
Ruchi, from an investor's perspective, I'm pretty sure you come across a good amount of pitch decks from across the world. What do you think keeps investors from investing money across borders?
Yeah, sure. I think one very, very important thing when startups come to countries like the Middle East is to understand the cultural barriers there, to understand the cultural nuances that are there. And especially during COVID, we saw a lot of digital health companies come to the Middle East, telemedicine and all of that. But if you don't use the local language, local slangs like Yala and all, you can't really model yourself in such countries, because a cultural barrier is a huge barrier. And that's what investors look for. Like, it's not just a copycat model that will work in the Middle East or any of those countries. You need to understand how those countries function, how to build relationship with not just the investors, but then all the stakeholders, the hospitals, the insurance companies, how does reimbursement work there. So if you have clarity on all of those things, then it's much, much easier to raise capital from abroad, especially because there's long-term patient capital available in the Middle East from sovereign wealth funds, family offices. There's abundant capital, but it's just that you need to build those relationships, and it takes a lot of time and cultural efforts to make it through.
And speaking of the Middle East, actually, I mean, we've been doing events there for the past 4 or 5 years, and a lot of startup founders come to me asking me, are the Middle East investing in companies who are based in America or who are based in Europe, or do they need a footing within the Middle East? What's your take on this? Has this changed over the past couple of years?
Yeah, I think Middle East is much, much more open for worldwide investments at the moment. So it's not just technologies who want to have a presence in the Middle East. It's also just US-based startups. I think the new generation of tech is now trying to enter Middle East, and the family offices know that they cannot just wait there and wait for startups to come. They actually come to the Bay Area, go to Europe, go to the Lausanne conferences and find these deals, because it's really important to stay on top of the game, right? Like if you're in the medtech or the healthcare industry, it evolves so fast. If you just wait for startups to come to the Middle East, you'll end up investing in the leftover deals that nobody really wants. So it's important for investors to come here in the US, go to Europe and all. And I think those are the kind of savvy investors that add a lot more than just capital. Dumb capital is available a lot, but you need the kind of people that would open a lot of doors for you in terms of distributorships and all of those things. So I think in terms of capital coming from the Middle East, it's not just startups moving to the Middle East, it's also startups based in the US, based in Europe, who might want to move to the Middle East later on or might not. But I think it's more or less more about having disruptive technologies and having the mindset to be open to investors from worldwide.
Understood. Prakash, you right in the thick of the transatlantic bridge between the UK and the US. How has it been over the past couple of months and years in terms of companies who are based in the UK and towards that side of the Atlantic to eventually set up here and possibly even seek investors from this side of the Atlantic?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is for innovators and startup founders, when they're looking sort of a cross-border opportunity, few things to look at it is MedTech is, or the broad spectrum healthcare life science tend to be a sector where you rarely see somebody with a college dropout can go and build a successful company, unlike other gaming and other typical tech or mobile app businesses. Most of the founders tend to be PhD, MD holder because it is very specialized sector. It needs subject domain expertise. It has to go through a certain level of regulation depending on what you are building. So the key thing to look at it is, where is this, the other geography, the cross-border that I'm doing? Three things. Number one, is there an appetite for adoption of my technology there? Number two, is there good enough? It may not be as competent as Silicon Valley for the late stage investment, but is there a good enough investment pool that I can syndicate my investment if it needed to be to diversify my funding pool? And thirdly, beyond the adoption, what is also needed is the talent pool, because you want to have some operational presence in that country. For example, naturally it comes to me, US and UK is because US is number one when it comes to medtech innovations, and UK is number two in the world in sort of deep tech and medtech innovations in the world for applications in healthcare and life sciences. So that part is there. And then you look at talent pool. For example, academia and universities. UK has 4 out of top 10 global universities in life sciences that produces high quality talents. If you need to cater and design your product or cater to the regulatory, cater to the sales and technical support staff, you have that talent pool, sometime half the cost that you will get in the Bay Area, in Oxford and Cambridge area. So, and then the other thing to look at it is, if I were to do a collaboration, whether it is clinical trials, clinical development, or R&D collaborations, to look at what is the existing infrastructure. Number one, the government is putting funding into infrastructure to enable that. And number two, what is the modus operandi there for academia, private, public-private partnership, right? And that is the bedrock of some of the greatest innovations for the US and the UK as well. And I think many other European countries, it's true as well, and other countries are catching up on that. So looking at those things, we see a lot of founders when we talk to them. These are their top of their chart. Depending on what stage of the companies are, if they're really early stage, they're looking at pre-seed and seed stage. Maybe they're looking international because the product value, the differentiation of the product they have is not right for the US market. Maybe it is right for another market. For example, US is a treatment incentivized country. So if you're developing something for preventative and those kind of things, doesn't get a lot of, it still can work, but doesn't get a lot of interest from traditional VCs. Whereas other countries, UK, Canada, and other countries and European countries, they have a centrally funded payer system. And because of that, there is a pressure for the payers to really keep the healthcare cost low. Thereby, they invest heavily into preventions. So if those companies at early stage, they may find other countries to be a sort of beachhead market. And if it is a different stage, a late stage, they've already saturated the market in the US, and now they're looking at international expansion, then I think some of the points that I mentioned above become very important, having that partnership, the appetite for adoption, the regulatory roadmap, and the government's infrastructure for funding, manufacturing, and enabling all that.
And when it comes to, over the past couple of years, I've graduated around 10, 11 years ago, worked in surgery. Back then it was always, if you're doing a MedTech company, go to the US, seek US investors because they're the most credible. Has this changed over the past couple of years? Are we seeing?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
When it comes to the credibility of non-US investors over the past couple of years, has it changed? Has it improved? Are we seeing more non-US backed companies succeeding with the capital that they're getting invested in? What would be your take on this?
I mean, I would say so, absolutely. But I think it's it's not new. So I think that the credibility, so to speak, really comes down to your own comfort level. Again, I think that as we see more and more good wins from companies that have
No law firms.
sought. Whoops, yeah, didn't mean to be a plug.
Shout out to Marty if he's gonna be listening to.
Good successful exits from that are companies that have raised foreign capital. It just makes some of us in the earlier phase very, very comfortable approaching those funds and recognizing that they're credible in many respects. But I think there's a level of diligence that one needs to take on, and I think that Ruchi pointed out the cultural factor is a huge element, because it's not just the language barrier that may be present, for which you need to absolutely simplify your language and your slide content, not to dumb it down, but to make it understandable, to remove jargon, to remove colloquialisms, to adjust your cadence and your velocity of speech, all super, super relevant. But just the factors that go into a particular region that may have certain implications for fundraising in the U.S. You may have to file with the Committee for Foreign Investment in the U.S. through the Department of Treasury. There are all sorts of things that you want to take into account and understand about that landscape. Coming in prepared is essential. I think if you're going into it like, hey, it's just another investor that just happened to be from somewhere else, I think you're missing an opportunity to seek out nuance that can be catch concern that you may have, that may be a clear misalignment, but also may reveal a lot of opportunity and benefit that you're not recognizing in a particular region and from a particular investor.
And speaking along the same lines, Ruchi, when it comes to some of the mistakes that startups do when they're looking to raise capital across borders. I'm pretty sure there's a good amount of startups here who are looking to get any capital that they can get invested into them from across the borders. What would be your advice to them to possibly even avoid when they're reaching out to investors across the Middle East, across Asia, or possibly even in Europe?
Sure, I think that's a very important question, because oftentimes I've seen like startups come to Middle East or Asia to raise capital and then become disheartened, and there are reasons for that, because as I mentioned, it's very, very important to build relationships, and these relationships take a lot of time. So if you think you'll just come there for one conference and go back and maybe not even follow up much, the capital will just come to you, that's not how things work. You need to follow up a lot. You need to send like general messages, follow up on the networking events that you've done at those conferences, because it's not just like one meeting or one video call that will get you the funding. It's a lot about the relationships that you build over time and how culturally sensitive you are to those regions, because people think a lot about like how you act, how you like interact with people, because it's a like not just the Middle East, but even Asia, it's culturally it's very, very different from the US, and like some things that people just say casually here, like people in the Middle East or in Asia would mind that quite a lot, and they would never say something to your face because it's a very, very sensitive market. But like if you don't work towards building those relationships, it becomes really difficult. And it's also like a lot of people like to do very deep due diligence as well. So you have to have a proper data room in place when the investors want it. Like if you take a lot of time to prepare the data room and you're not ready with that sort of information, you kind of lose the momentum, right? Like if you go to the conference, you meet people and they ask for a data room, and like for 2 weeks you're away and you don't give them access to the data room, they just forget about it, because so many deals that are coming to them. And these family offices that are out there, they're not like healthcare specific. There are some that are long-term patient capital for a particular rare disease or something like that. But in general, a lot of family offices look at various asset classes, not just they invest as LPs into VC funds and to private equity, hedge funds. And it's very, very important to get the attention of these like bigger investors for a particular startup. The good thing is these are long-term patient capital, so they won't force you to make an exit in like 5 years or 10 years. They would stay with you and be with you for the follow-on rounds as well. And one of the important aspects in the Middle East is rare diseases, which is very, very important, because what happens there is like people marry within the families, and that causes a lot of rare diseases that are there. And there's a lot of funding available for research, and the kind of data that's available there, it's very, very rare to find that kind of data elsewhere. So if startups are willing to work with the government on these genomic projects, I think that's one aspect in which like a lot of startups could benefit. And the kind of data that you build there and the kind of rare diseases that you get to work on, I think that's very important and very valuable for like worldwide data.
And that ties very well to culture, especially, I mean, again, speaking of the Middle East, they tend to invest more into companies that are closer to what they believe in or possibly that they suffered from. So yes, very good points. We're soon edging towards the end of our panel. I'd love to possibly, maybe each one of you, starting with Prakash, give, or rather try to delve a little bit deeper into at least one thing that every startup, every founder should make sure to focus and apply or possibly change when they're looking to seek capital across different borders. What's the most important thing that they should address or make sure that they're going to get right?
Sorry, I could not follow the last part.
I'd love for each of one of us to possibly answer and give some advice to the startups and founders of one thing that they should make sure that they address or possibly change when they're looking to seek capital across different borders.
Oh yeah, so when we look at time like this, there is everybody kind of is looking at, there is venture capital money is drying up, it is slowing down. But I think if you really look at it, there are great startups, great ideas, they're all getting deals all the time. And sometimes these are the time when some of the great startups come up. We know whenever there is a market dip, it actually is that litmus test to kind of go through your own validations of your product, your idea, working very closely with the customers. And I think now the investors are becoming really sort of grilling as opposed to in glory days of 2021 to really go through how well you have understood your market, whether it is cross-border, whether you're going to another country, whether you are even repurposing your existing technology platform or product to a new category. How well have you done your market research and customer survey, and have you understood your end users and the champions within the market? And I think the ability to show, I mean, of course, how big is the market potential, the TAM, SOM, you can always come up with that. But the key is like, how have you hardened yourself and gone through that litmus test before you are even jumping the gun to internationalizing or even changing into a different market or repurposing your product. And the second thing is, there is always this train cycles, right? So if you look at MedTech, okay, the whole healthcare and life science investment has gone down. As opposed, just like any other investment has gone down. Within that, you need to analyze, within even MedTech, there are certain pockets that has actually gone up, right? For example, in UK example, I'll give you, the MedTech sector is growing 14% CAGR year over year. So it's actually a positive sign. And I can clearly say that the UK government has really put a lot of emphasis on, they understand the convergence of AI and technology is going to be phenomenal in the MedTech space. And therefore, they have enabled now the data, a lot of like anonymized data that people can use to develop early diagnoses, develop new kind of medical tools, taking care from hospital to community, doing sick care to really preventive care, and also converting a lot of these analog to digital. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think VCs are looking at it, like Octopus Venture, Amadeus Capitals. There are CIC, there is Oxford Science Enterprise. There are prominent venture capital firms in the UK, and there are a lot of US venture capital firms. I can give you one statistic, 40% of the European VC money has gone to UK, and most of them have gone to like MedTech and frontier areas of the convergence of AI and data into innovating in the healthcare space. And we see quite a lot of cross-border flip-flops going on of investments, and people, VCs are looking for really tested, hardened assets, which have really, show the potential for the future, not because they build something that capitulated on the pandemic era and fell after that. But that is something that will shape the industry for the next 10 years. And I think smart BCs are looking into that space, both sides, UK, US, and across other countries.
Very good. Quite an extensive answer. Thank you. Would you have anything to add, Ruchi?
Yeah, I think I would love to add to that. So we also look at IP-led companies. So they're like, as Dr. Prakash correctly mentioned, that wave came during the COVID times, and it just, like telemedicine, digital health, it all went down. But when we look at companies, we look for some sort of intrinsic value that will be there in the company no matter where the market goes. And I think that's where we look in IP-led company like robotics and quantum and all of those things. And I think that helps us quite a lot. In terms of giving advice to founders who are looking to raise capital globally, I think it's really important to show the passion when you're doing the pitches, because if you are not passionate enough, or like if you're jet lagged, I know like circumstances change quite a lot, but the audience there is actually looking for the passion and the storytelling that you have for what you have built. What's the use case? Are you solving any unmet clinical need? I think that's really important to show that and to convey that to the investors. I think that's where a lot of startups who have amazing technologies, they fail just because of lack of efforts to pitch correctly, to have the kind of story that's really required to move the needle for the investors.
Thank you. You're still in the thick of it, raising capital for future rounds. So
yeah, we're in the middle of it, raising a $15 million Series A. But I think that the common characteristics that Ruchi highlighted, all of that same stuff is true, no matter where you are. Having an intense passion for what you're doing, making that conveyable in the context of whatever culture you're communicating with. From my perspective, it's about diligence. It's about setting yourself up to be ready for the audience you're talking to. If you know your audience, you can speak to your audience with precision. If you don't know your audience, you're just screaming into the wind. And even if you have great passion, if you're talking in a way that's not consumable to that audience, it's just not going to work out. So be prepared.
Yep, very true. And I believe, if there's a main consensus from what we've discussed, is that raising capital across borders is very much achievable. It's what companies have been successfully doing over the past couple of years, and hopefully we're going to continue seeing more of this, because essentially we are dealing with healthcare, same problems that one continent, one country is facing within one particular healthcare ecosystem, they're facing it in another, and essentially we're speaking about people's lives. Thank you very much. Truly an enjoyable conversation. Thank you.